Hi everyone. Before I start this video, make sure that you're a part of my Discord server by joining the link in the description box below. And in this video, we'll be going over A-Level Accounting 2023 October-November, Paper 3-3, question number 2. This is the structured paper 3, which consists of 3 questions. Each of them will be of 25 marks, and the total time limit given for this paper is 1 hour and 30 minutes, which means that ideally you should be spending about 30 minutes in order to solve each question. And in this video as well, we'll be attempting to solve this question number 2 under 30 minutes. So without any further delay, let's get started. The RT Club is a social club which also sells refreshments to its members. The annual subscription is 120. That's the subscription fee for a year. A life membership scheme was introduced at a fee of 1,000 per member on 1st January 2018. Then life membership fees are released to income over a 10-year period. So we just need to divide this 10,000 among 10 years equally. So that is just going to be 1,000 divided by 10, which is also in 100. So every year, 100 as part of the life membership fee will be transferred to our income and expenditure account for one life member. And there were 7 life members at 31st December 2021. The treasurer provided the following information for the year ended 31st December 2022. Okay. So at the opening date, we have 7 life members, and we have been given information at the date of 31st December 2022. So we have our cash account. Remember that this is our asset account, which means that all of the incomes will be included on the debit side. All of the expenses will be included on the credit side. And then we have bank account, again, similar process. But in this case, we can see that the opening balance is on the credit side. And the opening balance will be on the credit side only for our liabilities and capital accounts. But we're talking about bank account, right? And again, we have an opening balance on the credit side, which means that this is a negative bank balance, or we can understand this as bank overdraft. Let's take a look at the closing balance. Again, it's on the opposite side. So this also represents a negative balance, which is the bank overdraft. And the format is same. For our debit side, this will include all of our incomes. And on our credit side, this will include all of the expenses. Then we have been given the balances at 31st December for 2022, which is our closing balances, and for 2021, which is the opening balances. We have it for the prepaid rent. We need to make adjustment to rent. Then we have inventory of refreshments, trade payables for refreshments, equipment at carrying value, and subscription received in advance and subscriptions in arrears. Then one subscription of 120 was outstanding at the start of the year. It was considered irrecoverable and written off. So this is a subscription written off, which we need to incorporate during calculation of subscription account. Let's have a look at our first question. We need to calculate the profit from the sale of refreshments for the year ended 31st December 2022. So for this one, we can just create a trading account for the sale of refreshments. We can start with our revenue. For our revenue, we have to check the income section for our cash account as well as the bank account. Within bank account, we can see there's only annual subscription, cash transfer, and life membership fees. And within our cash account, we can see that the sale of refreshments was of 34,800. That's our revenue. So 34,800. Now we need to include our cost of sales. Firstly, we need to include the opening inventory. And the information regarding inventory was given above. Then we need to add our purchase, subtract the closing inventory. Okay, let's write down the values for our inventories. So the inventory for refreshments right here. At our opening date, that's 1,150. At the closing dates, that's 1,820. Let's write it down. So closing date 1,820, we need to subtract it. For our opening date, that was 1,150. Now for purchases, we need to look for the expenses, because while making purchases of refreshments, we have to pay for it, right? So the purchases of refreshments is right here within the cash account. So we paid 3,720. Then we have trade payables of refreshments. Again, this is the payment made through our bank account. And we need to make an adjustment for the trade payables given right here. Okay, let's figure out the total purchases. And whenever we need to make an adjustment for trade payables, we start with the payment made. Then we subtract the opening balance of trade payables. add the closing balance of trade payables. So in this case, we have payment made by cash of 3,720. Then payment made through bank of 19,600. Now we need to subtract the opening balance of trade payables because this refers to the purchases made in the previous year. So we should not be including this. And then we need to add the closing balance because this refers to the purchases made in this year but which are yet to be paid. This gives the total purchases to have the value of 23,540. Let's include it. Now we can figure out the total of cost of sales. That's just going to be 1,150 plus 23,540 minus 1,820, which results in 22,870. Now if we subtract this from our revenue, we will get our profit from sale of refreshments. That's just going to be 34,800 minus 22,870, which results in the value of 11,930. Now we need to calculate the value of life membership fees to be included in the income and expenditure account for the year ended 31st December 2022. Okay, remember that we have already calculated 100 is to be transferred for one life member each year to our income and expenditure account. And we already know at the opening date, we had 7 life members. Now we also need to look for any additional new life members. So for that, we need to check our income section of cash account and bank account. Within our cash account, we only have annual subscriptions, not our life membership fees. But within our bank account, we can see that the life membership fees for a total of 4,000. And remember that one member will have to pay a total of 1,000, right? So 4,000 just refers to 4 new life members. So in total, we have 7 plus 4 life members. That's 11 members. So for each of those members, we will be transferring 100. So the total transfer is just going to be 11 times 100, which results in 1100. That's all for the first part. Now for the second part, we need to prepare the subscriptions account for the year ended 31st December 2022. Okay, this is the subscriptions account. Now the format for subscription account is quite simple. We first need to start by recording the opening balances for subscriptions in arrears and subscriptions in advance. It was given right here. Now remember that subscriptions received in advance will be a liability because we've already received the amount for it, but we are yet to provide the services for these, right? And subscriptions in arrears is the opposite. This will be a part of our assets because we have already provided the services, but we are yet to receive the money for it. And always remember that the opening balances for assets will be on the debit side and the opening balances for liabilities will be on the credit side, which means that this 240 will be recorded as the opening balance on the credit side and this 360 will be recorded as the opening balance on the debit side. So on the debit side, we have the opening balance of 360. On the credit side, we have the opening balance of 240. Now on our debit side, we include the amount of subscriptions to be included within our income and expenditure account. So that's the subscriptions for the year. And we'll include this amount as our closing balance. Then on our credit side, we will include all of the subscription received within our bank account, all of the subscriptions received as our cash, and we also need to include the irrecoverable debt. Then we will include the closing balances on both sides. And the closing balance on the debit side again represents liability, which means the prepayment or subscriptions in advance. And the closing balance on the credit side will represent our asset, which means the subscription in arrears. Let's take a look at the subscriptions received in our bank, cash, as well as the irrecoverable debt. So within our bank account, annual subscriptions of 10,320 were received. This will go towards the credit side. Within our cash account, we have the annual subscriptions of 1,440 and the irrecoverable debt was of 120. Okay, so within bank, we received 10,320. As cash, we received 1,440 and irrecoverable debt were of 120. Now for the closing balances, we again have to refer to these information. So on our liability, we have 120. On our asset, we have 480. So our liability is now on the debit side, 120. Our asset is on the credit side of 480. Now the income and expenditure account, which is basically the subscriptions for the year, will be our remaining value or the closing balance, which means that we first need to figure out the total from the credit side. So that's 240 plus 10,320 plus 1,440 plus 120 plus 480, which results in 12,600. Now the subscriptions for the year is just going to be 12,600 minus 360 minus 120, which results in the value of 12,120. Okay. And also remember that you need to show your closing balances as the opening balance for next period on the opposite side. So this will go here. That's balance brought down of 120. This will go towards the opposite side. So that will be 480 as balance brought down. That's all for the second part. Now we have additional information. The deficit for the year was calculated as 1,540. And this is a deficit, which means that our expenditure was greater than our income. The managing committee was concerned about the financial performance of the club. We need to discuss the effect the following suggestions might have on both the bank overdraft. We've already concluded that there was bank overdraft at the opening date as well as the closing date, and the deficit. Okay, we need to write down the effects of the given suggestions. So the first one is reducing the level of inventory held. So what will happen to our bank overdraft as well as the deficit by reducing the level of inventory? Let's consider bank overdraft. By reducing the inventory, our overdraft might reduce, right? Because there is not cash tied up in the form of inventory. Now we might have higher cash as compared to the previous scenario where we used to hold a higher level of inventory. Because reducing the level of inventory just refers to the fact that we are now increasing our revenue. If we increase revenue, our bank overdraft might decrease because we will be receiving the money for those sales. That's why the overdraft will reduce. So the bank overdraft will reduce because less cash is tied up in inventory. Now we need to look for the impact within our deficit. Now remember that for our deficit, we just subtract our expenses from our income, right? And even if we reduce the level of inventory held, the total payment for the purchases is going to remain the same. There will be no changes. And inventory just refers to the remaining goods that we are yet to sell. And for those remaining goods, it will have to be purchased first, right? So inventory is also the leftover part of the purchases made. And regardless of the level of inventory that we hold, we have to pay the full amount for the entire inventory that we purchased in the beginning, right? So there will be no effect on deficit by reducing the inventory level because that is not going to directly affect the cost of sales as the purchases will be reduced by the same amount. Let's write it down. There is no effect on the deficit because reducing inventory would not directly affect cost of sales as purchases would reduce by the same amount. Let's move towards the second suggestions. That is encouraging more members to become life members. Okay, now the impact on bank overdraft is that it would reduce in the short term, right? Because if they're only paying the annual membership fee, they will be paying 120. But by becoming life members, they will be paying 1,000. But this will only be the payment currently, and there will be no further payments for the next 10 years, right? So which means that the overdraft will be reduced, but only in the short term, and we will have the increased amount of 1,000 minus 120, which is of 880 per life member in the first year, but there will be no any income or receipt within our bank account for the next 9 years. Let's write it down. The bank overdraft would reduce in the short term as there would be an increased receipt of 880 per life member, but only in the first year. Now, we also need to consider the effect on our deficit. And remember, we're talking about subscription fees, right? So our annual subscription fee is 120, but if we make a transfer from our life membership fund, it's only of 100. So in this case, the income will be reduced by 20 per each life member, right? Which means that there will be increase in deficit rather than any surplus. So the deficit would increase because the income recorded would be 100 per member, which is less than the annual subscription fee of 120. Alright, now for the fourth one, we need to suggest two other ways in which the financial performance of the club could be improved. So the very first thing is that we might recruit new members so that our subscription fee for the year will be increased, which means that our deficit might turn into surplus in the future period. So recruit more members. And the second method would be to increase the annual subscription fee, so that again the same thing, our total subscription fee will increase, which might turn the deficit into a surplus. So increase annual subscription fee. Now we have additional information. The treasurer, Sabrina, has only held that position since 1st January 2022, which is the opening date. When the previous treasurer, Joe, left the area, there were rumors that Joe had left taking some of the club's money with him. Sabrina is now suggesting that the club's financial statements for the year ended 31st December 2022 should be audited. We need to advise the managing committee whether or not the financial statements should be audited. We need to justify our answer. This is a 5 marks. We need to have 2 points against this auditing, 2 points for auditing, and then a final decision. So for against, we're talking about club, right? And it's not a company. So audit is not a legal requirement. Let's write it down. A club is not a company, and audit is not a legal requirement in most countries. Okay, then again, auditing will result in increased cost, and in this case we have a bank overdraft as well as deficits, so the club might not be able to afford it. Club might not be able to afford the audit cost. Now let's write down comments for auditing. The first thing is that Sabrina, who is suggesting that this should be audited, will be assured that no suspicion was falling on her, because if Joe had left taking some of the club's money in future periods, Sabrina might be suspected of the same thing. But if there is auditing of the entire financial statements, then there will be no such suspicions. Sabrina would be assured that no suspicion was falling on her And if our financial statements are audited, then they will be verified by an independent auditor, right? Which means that our bank manager might be happier to continue providing the overdraft facility, knowing that the financial statements provided by the clubs represent a true and fair view of the club. Let's write it down. The bank manager might be happier to continue providing the overdraft facility. Now, based on these factors, you need to make a final decision. So, personally, I would advise the managing committee that the financial statements should be audited so that the opening balances can be verified. So, the managing committee should audit the financial statements in order to verify the opening balances. This concludes the second question. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.